So yes, what I'm doing, or what I'm attempting to do, is to conceptualize exile journalism through South-South comparison. So as I said, I'm trying to avoid these comparisons that have been around for a long time of saying, okay, there is some journalists who produce something once they fled their countries, but they cannot fulfill X, Y, Z of this normative theory of journalism, which is defined as good journalism, right? So, and those theories, they were produced in and they are used in the Western Hemisphere, but they don't respect the reality of exile. First of all, not of exile, but also not of Global South journalism, of even different cultures of journalism to start with, and then to add on the exile as an additional thing. That we cannot pay respect to their work through just going with like, okay, but you're not objective, you're not on the ground, things like that, because there's obvious disparities between exile journalism and what we deem to be good journalism here in the West, which is what I just mentioned, like eyewitnessing, transparency, being objective, not having a political agenda. All of those things do not fit exile journalists, because already the terrain is inaccessible. They can't go there, yet they are reporting on it. Most of the journalists cannot be transparent about how they got the information, who are their sources, because not only the journalists themselves have to be reporting anonymously, but also their sources are obviously anonymous if they are still in the country for safety reasons. So this poster now presents like the first part of my results. I'm trying to do like a South-South comparison between East African and Latin American exile journalists. And this poster is based on interviews that I did with Eritrean and Burundian journalists who fled at different times from different contexts due to different reasons and are now in different exiles and still encounter all the same challenges of access to information, verification. Also, the simple fact of how are you going to distribute your journalism in your home audience if, like in Eritrea, there is no internet. If, like in Burundi, the audience, the listeners to the radio are going to be persecuted if it's going to be found out that they are listening to the radio, right? So you have to come up with completely new forms of journalistic production and journalistic distribution, and just that's what I said, like we need a new conceptualization of it, because exile brings a completely new realm. And so my work now is to first identify the challenges, which are unsurprising, but they have never been written down, and then to actually translate it into like, what does that mean for the journalist? And one of the most important findings so far is like when I say that exile journalism turns journalism from an occupational into an existential identity. So journalism as we know it is like, journalists have a very strong occupational identity with their journalism, right? I'm like, I am a journalist, that's my occupation, that's my identity, but it is very much based on established norms, values, established and recognized media houses. That's when you can identify yourself as a journalist. When you're in exile, all of that falls apart. There's no organization, there's no established media, there's some of the journalists, I don't know if I have a quote in here, say, I don't have the quote in here, I think, but it's about, Alexandre told me, we are now talking about journalism that is produced in toilets and cars because those prove to be the best soundproofed locations that they have, because they don't even have a building, right? So they do it wherever they can, and he said, we don't wear suits, we don't have shiny buildings, but we are doing quality journalism and we are being constantly dismissed. Our professionalism is constantly being dismissed. So when I say it turns into an existential identity, is like first in relation to safety. As Valerie said here, like a good journalist is a living one. First you have to make it out of the country still alive, then you have to keep your sources alive, and then you also have to make a living in exile, which is structurally underfunded / non-funded. So there's a lot of nuance in that statement and why it turns into an existential thing. And I also like the connection between existential and exile. So I really like that for my headline then. Then, of course, locality to transnationality, that's what I just mentioned. They can't be on the ground, which is one of the main pillars of journalism. You're there, you eyewitness, you do fact-checking, you see what is happening, and you verify it, and you're transparent about this process, they are not. Everything is transnational now, and it's fluid. And at the same time, though, it's very national as well, because exile also triggers a lot of nationalism. So it's going to be very interesting to conceptualize, and the same, the hybrid and innovative forms of journalism, which are non-recognized in the West, right? Like the Burundians have a radio station that they send over WhatsApp. So they record a program in the car, which is soundproof, send it as a voice note to their broadcast list on WhatsApp. The people can then download it whenever they have internet, listen to it, and delete it before somebody else finds out. So that's a very new form of journalism, which I think is very innovative. So I don't really know why it's not recognized, because in the West over the last couple of years, remember when the hype of podcasts started? Podcasts are the new thing. My Burundian colleagues were laughing. They were like, that's what we've been doing ever since we were in exile. Like, and now suddenly it's very cool and innovative, you know. So yes, all of that is, I try to say all of that in my poster.